Good evening. It's Friday, Shabbat Friday. It's around like 4, I guess, in Israel. And it's early in the morning in the East Coast. Um, this is Hannah Klein. Welcome to my podcast, Hannah Klein's Time. Before starting my podcast, please download my episodes and also talk about my podcast to your friends. Um, it was supposed to be yesterday's guest, and I have recorded uh, this interview already and conversation with uh, Leonard Grunstein. He is a retired banker and a lawyer. Um, he wrote a book because it's just right. Um, it's about the background story of how the U.S. Embassy was moved to Jerusalem. Um, and he was very much involved in it. And you are available to purchase it online on Amazon. I will post a link on it, so please purchase a copy from the link. But anyway, so today I am you are going to listen to our conversation about foreign terrorist organization and how the laws work. He explained in a manner that people without legal knowledge are able to understand. United States immigration laws are not um, um, are not as simple as the media are discussing. And it is not just those Palestinian supporters who are being deported at the same time. Please keep that in mind. And also, if you support a hatred, a mere raw hatred against a group of people who have who come to study as a university student, and the Jewish students are collectively harassed, assaulted on university campuses openly. How is that allowed? In my opinion, verbal assaults, that is subject to criminal punishment, in my opinion. Of course. It's not something, it's because a person it has some kind of faults that they are harassed. I mean, there are always people who want to harass. Like, I was harassed a lot of times when I was young for speaking English, for dressing different, for speaking standard Japanese. I never, almost never spoke. I had never even heard of a dialect in my entire life, until I went to elementary school, for example. But okay, this is not even about this. These Jewish students are harassed because of being born as Jewish, or because they are born in Israel. They are called occupiers. For what reason? I mean, those pro-Hamas protesters. Okay, I have Leonard Grunstein explained what they were doing on campus and why they're subject to deportation. And I just do not have words against those whatever, the protesters, college age protesters, or whoever who come to campus, occupy a certain area, public spaces, and harass Jewish people, students, and faculties who are supposed to be able to use the public spaces as well. I mean, this is something unacceptable. And they judge whether a person's good or bad based on whether they have served, well, somebody has served in IDF. Oh, this is another unacceptable fact. I mean, I have so many reasons um, that I believe this is not about free speech. And here's, you can listen to what these protesters are doing and why people from abroad, well, I have to say from foreign countries, um, have to be careful when coming to the United States to study with F1 visa or and also whatever the green card is also monitored the whole time. There is no point in discussing whether it well whether I have to say they they were just doing what they were doing or whatever. I just do not understand. And I would say uh, I just called some college age adults children. It's but you know what? I don't think they're children anymore. I don't think, honestly, I don't think they're children, but at the same time, I, it's, it's just so immature, but at the same time, it does have harmful intent to hurt people physically and mentally. This is so outrageous. And so, anyway, please listen to our conversation. Okay, so Okay, so now, so there are a lot of people in India who pay attention to Israel and Jewish people.
Yes,
Wow, that's interesting because I've got many listeners from India.
yes. Actually, a part of my family is married into a prominent Jewish family from Bombay. And
Wow.
yes, so my cousin married an individual, and then other people in the family
Mm.
married siblings in that same family. It's a big family.
Wow. How fascinating.
Yes.
Indian people are, I think in a sense, I think Japanese people have close feelings towards India because of the religious connections, ultimately.
Hmm.
So, and also, yeah, like in a sense, they share something, and I don't know why, but they make noodles from, in curry, taste. It's so Wow, I didn't know that. Yeah,
Yes,
so a lot of people should, from India should be listening to you then.
I
Now.
hope so.
So today I was just, I would, I as I asked you to, if you could well define what type of foreign terrorist organization is basically about. And well, it's I do understand what they are probably about, but in probably like for the people who do not know about laws very much and so forth or immigration systems, you know what are the important points when they stay abroad, do you think,
Well, we have
especially in
in
the
the
US?
US
Yeah.
some very powerful laws
Mm-hmm.
which weren't being so well enforced for a few years. But the laws are very clear, and they
Yes.
say that, for example, the Anti-Terrorism Act,
Mm-hmm.
and it's been amended sometimes over the years. And so it's interesting how people talk about the amendments, but they don't talk about the basic law, which is not that new and was affirmed by the Supreme Court in the Holder decision and found to be constitutional. And that law says you can't provide material support to a terrorist organization. Now, that's a foreign terrorist organization. That's an organization that's been designated by the State Department as a foreign terrorist organization,
Mm-hmm.
and then all sorts of rules that flow from that designation. Now, designated foreign terrorist organizations include Hamas, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine,
Oh.
the IRGC of the Iranians,
Oh, yes.
Hezbollah.
Yes.
So all these organizations that have been involved, and the Houthis who were removed from the list, but now are back on the list.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're not supposed to advocate for them. You're
Mm-hmm.
not supposed to be their PR person. You're not supposed to provide them material support, which can include all kinds of things,
Mm-hmm.
including, of course, money,
Mm-hmm.
but also propaganda, PR, all
Mm-hmm.
sorts of things. Okay. So, in fact, that was the point of the Holder decision. It was ruling about a bunch of people who were computer programmers, and they were espousing propagating the propaganda. And,
Yes.
and so that's material support. So now, if you bring that down
Mm-hmm.
to the universities, for example,
Mm-hmm.
if someone walks around, an
Mm-hmm.
individual
Mm-hmm.
who's not being paid, who's not following a script,
Mm-hmm.
who is not sharing materials that were handed out at a meeting,
Mm-hmm.
but merely in expressing their opinion entirely, and this is the language in the Supreme Court decision,
Mm-hmm.
entirely independently.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then that's a person's right to free speech. But if they're being paid,
Mm-hmm.
if they're handing out materials that were provided
Oh.
by the terrorist organization directly or indirectly,
Mm-hmm.
if they're training people, if they're going and enlisting people to be a part of this, well, those are things that are material support for a terrorist organization. So that's the Anti-Terrorism Act. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you're not a citizen if you have a student visa
Mm-hmm.
or you haven't yet become a citizen.
Yes.
There's a separate law under the Immigration Act that says you can't endorse
Mm-hmm.
or you can't espouse
Mm-hmm.
terrorist organization ideas or go enlist people to be part of it or teach them and to espouse and to endorse these
Mm-hmm.
ideas or a terrorist organization,
Mm-hmm.
because if you do that, your status could be revoked and you could be deported. Now, it's fascinating what's happened here procedurally
Mm-hmm.
because we do have a system of due process in the immigration law system. There's an immigration judge. The
Mm-hmm.
government, if you've been here, can't just throw you out. They have to bring you in front of an immigration judge.
Mm-hmm.
And today it's politely called the removal hearing. In the old days, it was called the deportation hearing.
Okay. Okay.
So you go in front of the judge and you present the case and you say, this guy or this gal went over there and they were espousing or endorsing terrorist ideas. They're a national security risk. That's another section. But it could be as simple as saying, we are Hamas. I endorse Hamas.
Mm-hmm.
Ugly things like that are inappropriate under the Immigration Act.
Mm-hmm.
And they could be grounds for saying, I'm revoking your right to be here. And if the judge accepts it,
Mhm.
that's it. So due process
Mhm.
is an inherent part of the system. Now, you can appeal to the Immigration Appeals Court, and if your appeal is granted, that's one thing. If not, then you can then go to the federal court system to appeal. The concept of going to a federal district court to intervene
Mhm.
before this is resolved in the immigration courts is
Mhm.
very unusual. Why? Because the only grounds really are that they're not attending to it quickly and you're sitting in a detention center
Mhm.
and you haven't been given the right to have a hearing on a bond, so you could post a bond and therefore not have to sit in their detention facility. Okay, this is standard practice. In fact, had the lawyers, instead of going to federal district court, gone
Mhm.
to Louisiana to the detention center in front of the immigration judge, they
Mhm.
could have made all the same applications. They chose not to. Now, why did they choose not to? That's their own thinking process. I can only speculate. And I
Mhm.
think it's because they wanted to raise issues that an immigration judge would laugh at, like free speech. What does this have to do with free speech? This is conduct. The guy was handing out Hamas materials. He
Yeah.
was advocating for Hamas. He was causing a whole group of people in Kuwait, which he represented, what exactly the position, we don't know, but he certainly negotiated as a representative of QAD with Colombia.
Oh.
And so uh, that organization is an organization of a whole bunch of groups that include, within our lifetime, SJP, all of whom support Hamas. And in all likelihood, many of them
Mhm.
are financed by either Samadoun, which has now been uh, uh, designated by the Treasury Department as a terrorist finance organization.
Oh.
Uh, there are others. So all of this. There's the Iranians claim that they were financing this. I mean, when you think of all those expensive tents and the original encampments that all looked alike, somebody had to pay for those things.
Yes.
And of course, on the bulletin boards and in handout, they were saying, come, we'll pay you a few $100s. They wanted people to come and they wanted to pay them to come. And they did
So
pay
they
them to
were
come.
actually paying people to come.
Yes.
I mean, that means that if a student, for example, from other country, under student visa, ever attends it, that's illegal for sure, because it's
It,
part of
yeah.
income, and also, which will probably not be reported, and at the same time, I mean, it will,
So I'll
violate
tell you what
other
they
laws.
claim. Well,
Yeah.
we had travel expenses, we had this, but it goes to that Supreme Court standard that it has to be entirely independent free speech. And all these things demonstrate that it's not entirely independent, especially when they're all handed scripts and they say the same things, reading from the scripts. You have to wonder how somebody who's reading from a script can say that it's their own independent thought.
You know what? It's so weird. People believe that they have to do that. I mean, they have a choice not to do it.
Hmm.
It's
Right. Well, it's fascinating. Somebody I read today, remember the movie Zelig by Woody Allen, where there was this guy who wanted to fit in everywhere and he assumes certain personalities and dress and everything just to fit in.
Mm.
That desire to fit in is very powerful. And many people are walking around and they want to be with the cool kids. I never had that desire when I was a kid.
Me neither.
But for some, it's like an addiction. It's the fear of missing out if they're not there. So there are,
Mm.
I believe, ignorant dupes who are hooked into this. But many are, I mean, if they go again and again and again, it's hard to be that ignorant. And when you're presented with something with the Hamas label on it, it's hard to say you didn't know. It's
Um,
possible once, you know. So the real difficulty is just think about it this way. Why don't they hire PR firms to do this? I mean, they're
that's
professionals.
true. Yeah.
Okay, because it's illegal. That's clearly illegal.
Okay.
You can't hire a PR firm to advocate and to spread the propaganda because at its heart, it's a foreign terrorist organization.
Oh.
So what they can't do legally, they're trying to do sub rosa
Hmm.
by enlisting a whole group of people who are just mouthing the same nonsense that would otherwise be put on the air and spread if it were legal, but it's illegal. So they're doing this whole drama, this whole show, because they
Hmm.
really can't do it legally. So their hope is they'll do it this way, and this way the message gets out. And sometimes it's even more effective to hear young, supposedly innocent students expressing what people say is free speech
Oh,
when when you examine it and you know that they are being given scripts and they are being trained and how
yeah.
to do this and how to avoid this Nerwin, this Kawani, she was part of the effort. It was publicized of
Hmm.
holding training sessions where she said you got to wear masks. You got to avoid the cameras. You don't want to be identified. This is how you avoid them. Here's the
What?
script. This is what you say. Yes, that's from within our lifetime.
They have to wear a mask. They have to. I mean, that sounds very illegal. You know?
Oh, yes. Well, that's covered by the law, and if you look at the lawsuit, a very powerful lawsuit
Mm.
was filed in New York last week
Oh.
by a bunch of very capable attorneys. And they go through all of these things because they are suing them individually and suing all the organizations, including Khalil, Kizwani, Students for Justice and Power, all of these organizations. And they are bringing out a lot of the facts, including the funniest, they masquerade in different forms. It's almost like when you see a name
Hmm.
that's being thrown about by these groups, you almost have to think the opposite. So, for example, one organization is called Jewish Voice for Peace.
Oh,
It's
yes,
not for
I have heard of it.
it's hardly Jewish. It was actually formed by non-Jews.
Uh-huh.
Once upon a time, the money came from all sorts of sources, the Rockefeller Foundation, the all these their funds where money comes in quietly and they distribute it so they can hide the sources, like the Tides Foundation, others like that. And then they have, besides all of that,
Hmm.
um, the guy who was writing
Hmm.
their social media post
Yeah.
was a guy named Hatem Bazayan, who's not Jewish. He would qualify for a lot of the things we're talking about in terms
Okay.
of probably having ties to all of the terrorist organization, but that's what's
Uh-huh.
alleged in the complaint.
Wow.
So it's just a name, it's just a front.
Oh.
And so you could put any name you want. I mean, so that's what they do because it gives them a little bit of cover. It gives them some suggestion of there are more people in this than you would think. But by
Mm.
the same token, it's a fraud. It's a fraud by another name. I don't
Oh,
know
yeah, that's
why
true.
we don't have truth and not for profit. We have truth in advertising.
Hmm.
We ought to have truth and not for profit names
Oh, exactly. Yeah. Oh, that's true. I mean,
because they hardly ever are what they appear to say.
mm.
And
But
that's why they choose those names.
yeah, and I have known students for Justice Palestine. for quite some time, before October 7th, right? I mean,
Hmm.
I think, probably October 7th was the time when I saw the real face,
Hmm.
obviously, what they are really. I mean,
Hmm.
to me, it sounded a little bit, creepy, to just approach them. But
Right.
they go verbally against me, someone, related to those organizations and attack on social media, for example. When I talk about like, I love Israel, I'm interested in Israeli culture, and they bite people like that. But
It's also strange to me,
mhm,
and I wrote an article about it once, when they use titles like as a Jew, as a rabbi. And the theme of the article was, why do you have to say that? Either what you're saying makes sense
mhm,
or not. That doesn't add any authority. So what? I'm a person. That's all that counts. And here's what I'm saying and why I'm saying it. And either it stands on its own
mhm,
or spare me all these titles because that's not what sells. It's the ideas
mhm,
and the authority of the ideas and the provenance of the ideas and the evidence that supports the ideas,
mhm,
not your title. And so it's only I think it's a beguiling way of speaking
mhm.
to fool people into believing it's authoritative, and it shouldn't be used. In fact, most rabbis that I know, when they greet you, they introduce themselves by their first names.
Yes,
I've
I
hardly ever
followed
met a
that.
rabbi who said, "Hi, my
Exactly.
name is Rabbi."
Yeah. 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 I
So
mean,
that speaks a lot to this issue.
oh,
They either
okay.
they either are telling you something that makes sense
Yeah,
or
that's
not.
true.
And so the ideas should speak for themselves.
Oh, yeah, it's it and one thing, probably they're using also like something like, Telegram, for example, group chat and so forth. But, it's not just that I realize, it's they are paid, they're handed out brochures. I mean, you know, um, it's also at the same time, when when I saw the protests, or when I see the protests right now, I mean, I like Professor Shah Davidai, he was kicked out of the campus or something, and he was posting
Yes,
about it. I wonder
yes.
if that's legal because he's the employee in the first place. And I know that he's arguing this, but it sounds very crazy. I,
Yep.
and also, like, those students made a blockade, and, ask Jewish students whether they're Jewish or not, whether they served in the IDF or not. They have a choice, not to answer simply. And I mean, physically assaulting, I mean, that's a
They
crime.
physically assaulted, they
That's,
harassed,
yes,
they
intimidated,
intimidated
yes,
people, and then they barred them, which
yes.
finally the new Justice Department people like Leo Terrell
Hmm.
and Pam Bondi, the new Attorney General, they finally intervened in the UCLA case,
Oh,
which
that's great.
even the district court judge issued an injunction saying, how could you allow Jewish students to be discriminated against by them being barred from going to classes or the library? You had to do something under Title VI, and he issued an injunction. And UCLA, it always puzzles me when institutions
Mhm.
think that they have different standards. I
Oh,
remember when I was a very young attorney, I worked for about a year in the Corporation Counsel's office of New York.
mhm.
And if somebody brought a legitimate case that I investigated and found that they had a legitimate claim, I would try to settle it. I
Oh,
wouldn't go defend it for defending's sake. That wasn't right. We had a higher duty to the
oh,
people to do what was right. So to see UCLA bring
mhm.
motion to dismiss, appeal, when they should have scratched their head and said, that happened on our campus? Of course we got to do something about it. How can we allow that to
Yeah.
happen? And it's a frightening thing where you have ideologues
Mm,
that I call it the inmates are running the asylum. It's the university system is very different than a business. In a business, you have a higher authority
mm,
that's the board, and then you have the CEO, the COO, the CFO, and they run the company.
mm,
In colleges,
mm.
the president has very little authority.
Oh, yes, yes,
The
exactly.
departments that do the hiring and firing.
Mm,
And so if the president says, I want that guy out of here, they laugh at him because they're tenured and therefore they could do whatever they want.
mm,
And they say, no, we're not going to do it. And that's approximately what's going on
mm,
because the presidents really are not in charge. Now, could they assert authority? Yes. Would that mean that they would have to fire a bunch of people truly? Yes. Would that mean that people would be upset with them and say, what right do you have? It's academic freedom and all kinds of words.
mm,
And the answer is yes, because you still can't conduct yourself
mm,
improperly. This is not about what you're saying. This is about what you're doing. And conduct that's inappropriate is actionable. And it's not covered by free speech. You can talk, but you can't hit somebody. You
mm,
can't tell other people, go beat that person up.
mm,
Those are illegal. And so there are definitions that were designed by very smart people who
mm,
enacted these laws,
mm.
including the founding fathers. And that wisdom has to prevail, not these
The other way
basically
around.
sharks who are taking advantage by repurposing words in different ways. I always love the guys who say it's genocide as if they know what it means. And then I ask, well, what
Exactly.
does genocide mean to you?
Yeah.
And then I pull out the books and I say, here's what genocide means.
Mm,
Well, this is my definition of genocide. Oh, yeah, well, okay. We need truth and labeling.
exactly. And you know what scared me about, this October 7th was that, you know, like there were, those students protesting, were denying what was happening.
Yes.
I mean, that
Yep.
really, really scared me. Really.
Yes. And there's
Probably
still people
those
who
people
do
don't
it.
understand, how scary it is, but it scares me off.
But even today, even Hamas
Mhm.
changed the figures
Yes,
that they
I just
reported.
saw it.
Right. So two-thirds were men of military age. They're
Yeah,
not admitting it they were all part of Hamas.
yeah.
But and so you see those things, and because they had no choice, because when you think about it, the UK finally sent a parliamentary committee, gave them the job of
Oh, yes,
investigating this,
yes.
and their findings were extraordinary because they totally contradicted the Hamas false narrative. So you have people who their source of information, or either they're bought and sold,
Hmm.
they are dupes because they're not challenging what they're being told. They're not independently trying to verify it. And so they repeat the Hamas talking points. And to this day, there are people who deny all these things, despite the overwhelming evidence that says it did happen and it was ugly and it was terrible and more than
Yes,
1,200 people were killed and 250 hostages and
yes.
atrocities were committed and God forbid rapes and all sorts of things that are not only are they totally illegal and against all the human rights law,
Mm.
it's atrocious, unacceptable behavior that can't
I
be
mean, it's
justified no
heinous.
matter what the cause. You can't
Yeah.
justify
Mm.
this kind of conduct. And it's frightening, as you say, it's frightening when people try to justify it.
Well, well, thinking, back what, what happened and, what you tell me, what frightens me is probably, maybe I'm watching, what Hamas narrative is. They don't care, what they
Hmm.
did to people. I mean, those means, they were cruel, they were inhumane against, I mean, those were crimes against humanity. I mean,
Yes.
just unacceptable. I mean, in any means. And, I just, no matter how many times I just think about it, I never change my mind.
Do
You
you
know.
know, I remember in elementary school when we studied about, God forbid, kidnapping. Remember the Lindbergh
Oh,
trial?
yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so it is a crime, kidnapping. It's one of the cardinal sins,
Mm,
and it's against every law to kidnap. And that's what they did. They kidnapped. Saying hostages is a polite word. It's
mm.
not hostages. They
They were
stole
stolen
people.
people. Yeah, that's what I was saying too.
That's what they did. And it's a crime against humanity from time immemorial. You
Yeah.
don't do things like that. And they did. And it's so unacceptable and it's not justifiable. You know what? It goes back to the biblical description
Mm-hmm.
of Amalek. Amalek is an idea.
Oh.
We don't know who Amalekites are anymore. They were mixed up. No one knows.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they exist, maybe they don't exist, but the idea they perpetuated is
Mm-hmm.
still in existence, which is killing for killing's sake.
Hmm.
There was nothing to be gained. Nobody rational would
Hmm.
believe that these people could have done what they intended to do. And
Hmm.
yet they did it anyway. And they
Hmm.
didn't do it to conquer territory. They didn't do it for gain. They did it because they did it. And that um, view of life,
Hmm.
and despite the fact that they knew might be committing suicide, nevertheless, they felt it was more important to kill somebody else, even if they would be killed, and even if it had no purpose, no rhyme or reason, totally irrational behavior.
Well,
Well,
see, that's
that's
one
a
of the reasons.
danger to the entire world. That is pure evil. And they don't believe in God. They can say they believe in God. They don't believe in God because
I
whether it's the
believe.
Bible, it's the Quran, it's law, it's international, there is nothing,
Hmm.
nowhere, no how, that
Hmm.
says this kind of conduct
Hmm.
is okay. So, in the name of resistance, people are justifying it. And then you have to ask yourself, resistance to what? Gaza was basically its own state.
Yeah, I know.
No,
And
and by the way,
mhm.
people say, well, there it was like a prison. What do you mean like a prison? People went everywhere. How did Gaza get COVID?
Yeah.
There were people from Gaza visiting China.
Oh,
They're everywhere. What are they talking about? And it's an example. What, they can't get on a boat? By the way, the fishing industry is bigger than it ever was.
hmm.
So what are they talking? None of these statements they roll off their tongues
Hmm.
turn out to have any factual basis. In fact, when you try to look at the facts, you usually see totally opposite.
Yeah, and I was talking about, Gaza map with, former, colonel of IDF,
Hmm.
Zamir. According to his explanation, what people are claiming are, the protesters, like the Netanyahu destroying the building, all these things. Maybe, I mean, Hamas is obviously, enjoying using the prime minister, as a figure. And that came out on a stage, obviously, that cruel stage, and they paraded the baby, and a young child. And I mean, yeah, I saw the stage, and just I just thought that what I believe was actually turned out to be true. But I mean, um, it's just that like I, I just when I showed actually the actually the just the very tip of the report you mentioned the UK parliamentary report and to a girl like high school age girl. They don't know the scale of what happened. And
Hmm.
I was talking with Michael, or the rabbi, I mentioned. He was saying that 65,000 people poured into, Israel from Gaza. I mean, that's like crazy. I mean,
Yep.
like that's like, I just do not understand. Okay, because you don't watch Japanese news. What I heard was that, like Israel's like blocking all the electricity, like water, they blew up the water pipe, by the way, the Gazans, I mean Hamas. And there's no water, electricity, but they're using, kind of cell phone or something.
By the way, there's a person on Twitter, she goes by the title Imshin, who
Oh, yes.
publishes all sorts of their own videos,
Mhm.
that they post on various social media.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, it's nothing like what they say. I visited Gaza twice.
Hmm.
It was before Hamas.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
and it, I can't tell you every neighborhood was beautiful, but there were a lot of beautiful neighborhoods.
Oh, there
And
must be. Yeah.
it's interesting when APAC brings people to Israel, they
Mhm.
bring a diverse group. And one of the first things they do is they say, "Would you like to visit Ramallah?" And
Oh.
and they go to visit Ramallah and they come back. And I remember the group came back
Mhm.
and they start telling me, I've never seen such nice condos. It rivals Miami. I said, yes. I said, look, not every building is going to be a luxurious building, but yes, there are an awful lot of luxury condos in Ramallah. And it's an example of the eye-opening effect of actually being there and seeing it because it bears no resemblance to the propaganda mills that turn out this nonsense that's designed not to engage the rational mind, but purely emotional.
Yeah.
And that's why they use these pictures. My God, they use pictures from the Syrian war that had nothing to do with
With
our times. That was the civil war when Assad was killing out his own people
yeah.
and they gassing them, remember?
Yeah.
and
Yes.
they use things from South America. They use things from all over, and you
Mhm.
could tell because the uniforms are not exactly right. The scene doesn't look exactly
Yeah,
right,
exactly. We can check all these things.
and
Yeah.
there are people who do,
Mhm.
and it's an exa why would they have to lie? If it was so true, why would they have to lie? Why would they have to manufacture all
Mhm.
these things? Because it's a lot of lies. Am I going to say that everyone is perfect?
Yeah,
Everyone's not
that's so true.
perfect,
Yeah, exactly.
but but to say it's a God forbid, oh, God should only protect us.
Yeah, yeah, that was, it was cruel, but I just saw a massive amount of people, claiming the wrong side as the victim and wrong
Right.
side as the aggressor. I mean, this has been happening over and over. And, October 7th, I mean, that, came to a point, probably, I guess, like, majority of Israeli people thought that this has to end. I mean, you know, a lot of news media say opposite, in the opposite manner. Israel has been attacking, but actually there have been attacks from, Gaza all the time, constantly.
Hmm.
There have been terrorist attacks and I just, yeah, like, I don't exactly understand why. these people, just go crazy about the propaganda, but at the same time, I there when there was a major earthquake, like the Great East Earthquake, like 10 just within 20 minutes, there were like floods of false information about, Japan. Like, this is like Japan not being safe. But this reminds me of who's doing it. Kind of like,
Hmm.
CCP China, for example,
Yeah.
or somebody, there could be, those neighboring countries wanting to propagate things, right? I mean,
You know,
social. Mhm.
it's because when you look at the early beginnings, I mean, Yasser Arafat, Mahmoud Abbas were
Mhm.
trained in
Yeah.
Russia. And we use the term nihilism,
Hmm.
which is a very powerful word because the purpose is not to accomplish any goal other than to destroy what is.
Hmm.
There's no program for the day after. It's we've got to destroy everything that is. Now, why?
Hmm.
Uh, I now make the following suggestion. It's because the people who are advocating it think they'll come out on top.
No.
And so they don't have any plans because they can't do it better. Socialism hasn't worked anywhere at any time.
Yep.
And there's a reason why it hasn't worked because a bureaucrat
Hmm.
doesn't know any better than anybody else. In fact, no one knows any better than anyone else.
Yeah.
But somehow God set up the world that if we all exercise
Hmm.
free will,
Hmm.
that somehow a market develops
Hmm.
and it works, especially when we layer on to that what we all have in our systems of ethics, which is we've got to take care of the people
Hmm.
who are somehow displaced
Hmm.
in those big moments and movements of history
Yeah.
so that everyone can live.
Hmm.
So if you believe in life,
Hmm.
then the free market, I call it the free market with heart. When you
Hmm.
have a free market with heart, which means the people who are benefiting give back a
Hmm.
certain percentage of their earnings
Hmm.
to charitable endeavors to make sure that everyone benefits.
Hmm.
Well, that system works. It works in Japan, it works in the US, it works in Israel. It
Hmm.
works so well. And we know that the other system doesn't work. And they use new words now. It's funny, the Democratic Socialists say, well, we don't have centralized
Hmm.
management. We
Hmm.
have decentralized management. Like there's a difference. What's the difference if it's a local Politburo and a national Politburo? The fact is, it's undermining everyone acting in their enlightened self-interest. And when you have enlightened self-interest, which means it's not all for you, you can do better. Two people can do better
Hmm.
than one person.
Hmm.
So it makes sense to do things together.
Yeah.
That's enlightened self-interest. So if everyone can do well, that's wonderful. And I do not believe, I believe God's plan is there is no zero balance. It doesn't work that way.
Hmm.
It's there's enough,
Hmm.
everyone has their own destiny and
Hmm.
everyone can do great.
Hmm.
And the fact that one person does better and one person does less, it's not a zero-sum game.
Hmm.
They could also get better. We're all under God.
Hmm.
And the reality is, we all have a mission in life. And so, if you think that way,
Hmm.
you have the wonderful abundance where we have more middle class people today than ever in history.
Hmm.
It's an amazing thing. It used to be very rich and very poor.
Yeah.
Now there's middle class across the world.
Hmm.
And that's a wonderful part of this free market with heart.
Yeah. Exactly. We don't have to be, we can fall somewhere, in between,
Right.
But
But
see, I I was, when I was, feeling a little bit, I just expressed some, anger sometimes, to, like Colonel Samir because I have a common mutual friend, with him. And, and he said, like, don't be emotional when you don't like something, which is true because
Hmm.
I mean, when I, for example, look at, PR or, propaganda, we need to see whether it's propaganda or PR, right?
Right.
There's a huge difference between that. And at the same time, if it's a lie, it's a lie. And it's kind of like hard practice, but it's true. I mean,
Hmm.
but yeah, well, I would ask myself if I, would protest against Israel when I was maybe 17. I will never do it. I would never do it. You know, it would never change, and it wouldn't get any better, just, just myself all the time. And see, like, that means that, being young doesn't mean anything. I mean, if they're guilty, they need to be responsible for it. I mean, they need to be responsible for their behavior at the same time.
Hmm.
So, I felt that, these children, these children, or adults, I have to say, respectfully, um, you mentioned UCLA. There was, self-proclaimed activists there, from UCLA talking with Mossab Youssef Hassan, the former
Hmm.
son of Hamas. I mean, um, he's UCLA college kid, but this Mossab Hassan, he was, giving better definition of Palestine. I was listening to it,
He's
and
very good. He's
yeah,
very
he's very
good.
good.
And he makes mincemeat out of these propagandists because they're just repeating the talking points. And he
Yeah.
actually was there, knows it. I
Hmm.
remember, as we're talking, there was a Soviet refusenik who was in jail for many years until he was finally released. Yosef Mendelovich was his name.
Oh,
I think he's a rabbi now in Israel.
oh,
But I remember when he came out, our synagogue in Staten Island was very supportive of his wife and him.
mhm,
And so when he got out, he came to speak at the synagogue. And I remember somebody asked the question, shouldn't they be against XYZ organization? And he turns to them and he says to them, you know what? Don't waste your time being against. Be for something
mhm,
and use your energy to be for something. These movements are all, if you notice, destructive. They're not in favor of something. If they
mhm,
were in favor of something, there are things to do. You can volunteer, you can go there, you can help out,
mhm,
uh, doing good.
mhm,
All this kind of voicing, I'm against this, I'm against that. Use your energy more effectively. We're on this planet to do some good.
mhm,
And I wish they would teach that.
mhm,
In fact, they're teaching the opposite. Virtue signaling
mhm,
means more than actually doing something
mhm,
good. So talk about how you're such a good person and this and don't spare me. Don't talk about what you are. Tell me what you do.
yeah, that's
Tell me
true.
what good you do.
Yeah, just calm down, take it easy, and just talk about yourself.
And when I reflect on it, I always hear Yosef Mendelevich's voice in
Mm,
my head saying, don't waste your energy on being against. Be for something.
mm, I see. Um, yeah, like, see, like, it's like like I was just looking at, just Twitter today. I think it was today. And I think, it was I'm sorry, I just forget his name. He's a Penn State, student. You might know him if I Yale Jacobi.
Yeah, yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's a good, good
His
person.
his yeah, his postings are interesting. And I've
Hmm.
been, looking at. his postings, and he was writing. I th it was like about a university, like there are college kids blocking, the auditorium,
Right.
not to give lectures. I mean, that's a public space, I mean, it's
Yep.
not a private place. And but I know that it's, if it's properly a privately owned, university, then it becomes a private property. But when, um but it's still commonly shared. And I wonder if it's, a form of free speech to just scroll on the blackboard and, say all these lies and just, tell the lecturers not to give lecture and the university honors that. That's
Well,
not
under
being
under
respectful.
under Title VI, it expressly talks about you're not allowed to interrupt
Mhm.
educational operations. That's the
Right?
language. Yes.
Yeah.
So I don't see why they can't say to students, here's our protest space.
Hmm.
Okay? You
Hmm.
can go there, but don't you dare
Yeah.
interrupt students in the library
Yeah.
because that's educational operation. Don't you dare go in the classroom. And by the
Exactly.
way, I can't get over how could they allow a professor
Hmm.
who's teaching medicine, engineering, math, economics to get up there and start talking politics? Well, what place does that have? And we're all there to learn the subject we signed up for.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't waste time.
Yeah.
It's you want to make a political speech, go to that corner there of
Yeah.
the campus where you could stand
When
there
you
all
make
day.
the statement,
I remember it's so funny when we went to London the
Mhm.
first time and we went to Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park, and people were just spouting. Or on 42nd Street, there was also a corner where people would just lecture people. They would just get up there and start talking. All right, you want to listen? Gather around. If not, keep on walking. Okay. It was like off the regular sidewalk, so it was like a little spot. So it was much like Speaker's Corner.
Oh,
So
okay.
exercise your right to free speech, but don't interrupt
Hmm.
what other people are doing. Everyone has a right to pursue their life.
Hmm.
And but they insist on disrupting. And that goes to that nihilism. They want to destroy. And
Oh.
that's that whole movement of destruction is
Hmm.
very troublesome. It's only negative,
Hmm.
and it has no redeeming quality. It's
Hmm.
not building it's not demolishing for the purpose of rebuilding. It's demolishing for demolition's sake.
Yeah.
And it's a terrible instinct.
Hmm.
And it was the plan. It was the KGB's plan way back when, which is why they trained the IRA, they trained the PLO,
Yeah.
all these organizations in order to disrupt, in order to destroy. And so we've got to be mindful of it. Uh,
Hmm.
Free speech has a place. Free speech is incredibly important.
Hmm.
Um, but it can't disrupt educational operations. There's a higher purpose.
Hmm.
And so, you know what? You're not being denied your free speech if you're told that's where protests go on over there.
Hmm.
Go ahead. And anyone who wants to listen can listen. And by the way, if you want to book time, we have a rotation and
Yeah.
book some time like everybody else, but don't disrupt the classroom.
Yeah.
Don't
Exactly.
prevent people from going to classes.
Hmm.
Those are strictly forbidden.
Hmm.
And universities that are not enforcing that, I cannot for the life of me
Hmm.
understand
Yeah.
how they can get away with that. Because why would you pay tuition not to go to class?
Yeah, I mean, it's at least somewhat like $60,000 or something, right? Because
Uh,
like
Anywhere
a year or
from
so.
that to over 100,000 a
Yeah,
year.
exactly. At
Yeah.
Columbia, like because I used to get, just, like advertisement from Columbia University all the time. So I
And by the way, when you think of Colombia, I've looked at statistics lately that have been published now online, and it's amazing to see
mm,
the numbers of foreign students,
exactly, yeah,
and it's not recognizable. I mean, in some cases, it's a majority when you add up all the different categories. They put them into different categories. So it's what's happened. Now, I'm not against people coming to this country and studying, although I'd like them, if they're studying, to stay here, do
exactly.
something productive for the country.
Yeah,
But
you have you have known a lot of Japanese people throughout
oh
your
yes,
life.
yes, yes, and I have many friends, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
But that's what
so
made this country great. There's
yeah,
no
I mean,
question about it, and we celebrate it.
yes,
Uh,
exactly. That's
but
what,
it's
yeah.
because everyone who came
Mm,
and studied and stayed and
yeah.
does
Hmm.
enormous good.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I was often in my friend's house in California, but I've never encountered any crime. It was in the suburb, but I did not I actually did not see any, foreigners, around the area because it was very much in the suburb, and only cars could access to, the
Hmm.
area. So, I mean, it did not have public transportation nearby so much, so it was very much in the suburb. But see, I mean, when I just stay around those areas, and go to like supermarkets, or just all those areas, I use English all the time. I never use Japanese. And when I started you started using social media, I started to get to realize what downtowns are like in the United States too. You know? But I mean, I have never had, you know, and problems, staying in the United States. And it was very nice to, speak freely in a manner with decency, with people around me because there were no racists, basically. I was, the only, kind of Asian person, and there was another, person from China. But, there was no one who was, being racist against me. They were very, very friendly to me. And so, I mean, I just do not understand all these hostilities going on campus and allow it at the same time.
No,
It's
no, and
very
it's agenda
scary.
driven. I mean, I grew up in fully integrated neighborhoods,
Hmm.
and it was a family atmosphere.
Yeah, exactly.
And
That's the atmosphere that I had.
if I was working on a car and a neighbor could help me or I could help them, it
Hmm.
was ordinary interaction.
Hmm.
There was no conscious intent. It was the opposite. It was ordinary life. And
Exactly.
I guess looking back, ordinary life is extraordinary.
Yeah, that is true. That happens at the same time.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, yeah, I just, I I really feel, students have no problems, coming with F1 visa, being provided with green cards, all these things. But they have to be careful that, United States enforces, laws, when there's a
Hmm.
violation. I mean, that's the
Yep.
same thing as Japan.
Hmm.
But, I think that, this, narrative is very important. It's not, being autocratic, but, it's important to have maintain public safety at certain standard.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, I mean, I'm very appalled at, some media coverage. I've been reading,
Hmm.
but, I just don't want to talk about it on social media anymore because, I feel very uncomfortable on what they're discussing either. So, yeah, but probably I would say majority of the Japanese people do not understand the situation fully. And, being misinformed is very scary,
Hmm.
and I'm talking about this because there are at some point more Japanese listeners, and there are subtitles in this on this podcast, so people can read it at the same time, not just listening to our conversation. So just I just hope really, that the young people, who, go to foreign countries, I mean, do not have, problems, because of being misinformed. And this
Hmm.
information issue is very serious. I mean,
Hmm.
people cannot say we did it, and if we say no, that's okay. I mean, that's not allowed in the first place. So,
Yep. Yep.
I mean, it's just, it's just, it's and what I saw was just, terrible too. I mean,
Hmm.
and it's sometimes too hard to describe, but it's important to talk about it. But you know what I mean. But anyway, I just yeah, thank you for all this explanation, and I just went over
Not.
like in
Thank
myself.
you. All the best.
Yeah, likewise to you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, just I just made you stay for another 30 minutes. So,
Okay.
so I hope
I
that your
appreciate
your
it.
your book comes out, because it's just right,
All right.
in April in Hindu.
Yes.
Your relatives can read it.
Excellent.
Okay, so I hope you have a nice day.
You
Yeah,
too. All the
thank
best.
you so
Thank you.
much. Okay,
Okay. Bye.
bye.
Goodbye.
So, I do not believe that it is appropriate to call the Hamas protesters victims. They are not victims. They hurt people in many ways, and they have violated laws. And there are differences between propaganda and commercials are run by companies. I mean, there are laws that sets the criteria of the commercials, and this information, like what is happening now, denying October 7th, this is horrific, unbelievable, and unacceptable. Okay, this is never again, and never forget. And if I were much younger, if I maybe when I if I were young, um, would I do it? No. Considering myself when I was in college, I hated to be affiliated with this kind of activities. There, even though there was none. Well, I will not say zero, but if I were to engage, I mean, if I were forced, even if I were to be forced to be engaged, I would still refuse it because that's the choice I have the right to choose. Okay, not their choice, my choice. Okay, my decision, my choice. I am not complaining about the past childhood about myself. It may have sounded that way. I don't have grudge or whatever. I mean, they just decided to leave me in a way um, after a certain time, but uh, I do get some bad impressions, and of course, I do have bad memories at the same time. I mean, I do not forget it, and I do feel terrible personally. At personal level, I do feel terrible for the Jewish students, like young Jewish students, experiencing all these harassments on college campuses. And the university faculties try not to stop. And also, yeah, some are engaged in it too. And uh, the university does not stop it. I know the presidents don't have authorities to do it, as we discussed, but this is just unbelievable. And I'm very, very thankful that the United States government does indeed have this powerful legal systems to fight against anti-Semitism. I mean, this is not just about President Trump, but it has to be enforced in this manner so that we can avoid a real terrorist attack, major terrorist attacks in the Western nations, including Japan and other civilized nations, to show support towards Iran or the aggressors. I mean, Hamas, Islamic Jihad. And this is a serious felony. And those who go to the United States to work or study are supposed to be engaged in those activities, and they do not have any problems having their ordinary life. So I just hope that those who just go to the United States are not engaged in the activities that are not supposed to be that should not be inappropriate in many ways. Just it is just so abhorrent to even watch or hear. Okay, but anyway, I just cannot keep on going like this. But there is a reality that this is the free speech issue. This is just out of the question, and this has to be dealt as serious crimes, criminal cases. But anyway, it's Shabbat Friday, and I hope that people have peaceful Shabbat with your family or friends, whoever. Anyway, Shabbat Shalom. Good night. Have a good day and good morning. Anyway, good night.